Data is simply information. Don't be frightened about the fact that it sits on technology.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to this episode of the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce Directors Club podcast. In this series, we get to explore some of the most interesting characters, directors, and leaders from Cumbria, and perhaps on occasion beyond. The Directors Club is kindly sponsored by Rachel Bell Wealth Management and Muckle LLP. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. Today, I'm with Andrew Burrell, the Director of Enable Success and Non-Executive Director of the Cumbria Chamber of Commerce. So anyone who's met Andrew will know that he's got an electric personality and infectious enthusiasm. And having had the privilege of hosting a Directors Club panel discussion with Andrew, talking about data-driven decision-making, I know firsthand that he can make even the most complex discussions simple and understandable. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. So let's get into it. Hello, Andrew.
Hello there, Eve.
Hello. I hope that intro did you justice. I think you probably have got one of the biggest personalities in Cumbria.
It's a very nice thing to say, I think. I'm not really sure. We'll see as we go along.
Yes, absolutely. So can you start by telling me a bit about your background? Where are you from?
Well, I am actually Cumbrian, born and bred. My family goes back generations, and I jokingly say to people that, you know, we go so far back that I'm pretty sure they're related to some of the sheep, to be honest with you. It's a great privilege to come from Cumbria. Part of me wants to say that I'm a Westmoreland lad, because I even go back that far. And I went to school here, both primary and the grammar school, Appleby Grammar School. I went and worked away in Europe and places like that. But I came back about 15 years ago and worked virtually. So the whole COVID thing was quite interesting for me because it was something I was very used to. But then I chose to take redundancy and started my own company called Enable Success. And that is driven once again by my passion in Cumbria to help small and medium enterprises get the most out of their data. In the past, I'd worked with really big players like Barclays or Primark or Lufthansa or Volvo. The list is endless. But I realized that, in fact, all organizations have data, and all organizations want to make sure that they can get the most out of, you know, their data.
So you said that you went to Appleby Grammar School and you're a Cumbrian born and bred.
Yep.
So in school, were you the class clown or were you the teacher's pet?
I was both, actually, depending on what subjects. History, my history teacher, I was the teacher's pet. In biology and in maths, I was probably the class clown. Yeah. I was never the genius. Just want to point that out.
So can you remember what grades you got?
I know that I got good grades in maths and biology and history, but terrible grades in English and geography and home economics.
So can you cook anything or not?
Oh, I'm brilliant at cooking now. Absolutely. Well, yeah.
Actually, you made an amazing loaf of bread, didn't you?
I did.
The last time I spoke to you, were baking bread.
I was. So, I turn my hand to almost anything.
Yeah, so stick that home economics.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
So what about further education? What happened once you left school? What was next?
Well, I wasn't brilliant. My A-levels I really flunked. But I ended up getting into what was Teesside Polytechnic and did an HND in public administration, which sounds incredibly boring. And I suppose it was really, apart from the fact that we were studying government at the time when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister. So I'm not going to say whether I agreed with Margaret Thatcher's policies or not, but what I am going to say is she made the subject really interesting because she was such an interesting politician and she really made politics interesting. So that was that. Then I left. I got really good grades at that, actually. And then I left that. Then I went and worked for HSBC, moved down to London. And then I did something a bit strange and decided I would train to be a Catholic priest, as you do. And so I went and studied philosophy and theology for a couple of years and really enjoyed that. Decided that maybe the Catholic priesthood wasn't for me. But I did go on to do an MA at the University of London in philosophy of religion and really enjoyed that. And currently I am doing an MSc with Hull University in digital transformation. So I flowered late, or should I say I blossomed late when it came to academics.
And do you know, I don't think that's particularly uncommon with entrepreneurs, is to say that they flowered late. They found the thing that they loved and followed that passion rather than taking their worth from what a grade said at school.
Yes. Yeah, and I really do believe very much in education for people as they get older. I'm also an associate director with the University of Cumbria, which I'm really proud of. And the work that the University of Cumbria is doing around helping people get back into education, I think is really important. I really do. I don't think people should ever stop studying if they're into it.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what you do now, as well as educating people around their data and around what their business does and how they use it.
Yes, absolutely.
So you said that you went to work for HSBC in London, and I think that's something that I hear a lot of, is that Cumbrians tend to fly the nest and head off to a big city and then maybe come back. What was the draw of going away to work in London for HSBC?
I think, I'd grown up in Appleby, and I was working for HSBC in Appleby. Actually, I was working in a few of the branches. So I was working in Carlisle at the time in what is now a pub, the one on the corner by the railway station. But that used to be an HSBC branch. And I had been going to the area office and saying I'd like a transfer down to London, just because my mate had moved down to London. So I thought, well, I'll do that. And I did. I said to my mother that, if I don't like it, I can always come home. But I loved it. I really did enjoy it and had an amazing time and had wonderful opportunities in London. But I think that eventually the call of Cumbria dragged me back. Took a while, but I did come back.
So thinking about what happened in London then, you said you had some amazing opportunities. What sort of things were presented to you? What sort of things did you get to do down there that really shaped who you are now?
First of all, working in the bank was brilliant, because I started off in a very small branch in a very small area of London called Maida Vale, which is quite posh actually. But then I moved into a bigger branch, and that the scope that you could get because of being in London, you could just move between all of these branches and get different experiences and different job roles. So that was really good. And that gave me the chance and gave me confidence actually that I could work and I could deliver really good professional work, to be honest with you. And then from there, and when I was in London, I actually wandered into the Catholic Church. I was Church of England prior to that. And from there, I wandered into training for the Catholic priesthood. And that would not have happened if I hadn't have been in London, that's for sure. And then after, when I came out of there, when you're in London, you can move around and do all sorts of stuff. So I got jobs in foreign exchange, in the international banking, in the city. That's one thing that I love about London, is that you can just move around if you want to. And that's exactly what I did. I took full advantage of that. And then eventually I actually went off and lived in France and worked for a voluntary organization with people with learning difficulties. And then I ended up working in a ski resort in Marybelle as well, but then moved back to London. Once again, got a job with an American international company called Teradata. And that was basically the rest of my life for 21 years. And bizarrely, from being in London and buzzing around and trying different things, then I worked for an international corporation, and I did loads of things in that. So I like to obviously put myself into situations where I have a lot of choice.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get into Teradata? What was it about data or Teradata that really drew you in that direction?
It definitely wasn't data that drew me towards it, to be honest with you. It was project management. When I was living in France, in Marybelle, I decided one day, I was a bar manager, And I decided, right, it was a seasonal job, obviously. So I thought, right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get a job for an American company where I can use my languages, because obviously living in France, I'd learned to speak French. So I went back home and I saw a job advertisement in the Times, and I looked at it, I applied for it. It was actually a recruitment agency recruiting for the company. And I went into project management and process improvement, actually, but ended up going into consulting. With that, I was doing data analysis for banks, for branches, because of my background with HSBC, which took me all over the world. And then eventually got much more into the data side of things. And that was where, I did actually get interested in data by that point. And Teradata had a very specific solution for big FTSE companies. They don't sell to the smaller companies. They only sell to the top 500 companies in the world, basically. And so the data was all about how those companies brought their data in from different sources. I ended up being the director for the Prague office, where we had about 100 employees who did basic data development. We would say ETL, extract, transform and load the data from one system into another system. And then they would start running their reports, whether it be for the European Central Bank or for performance improvement, Lean, Six Sigma, stuff like that needs data to be successful, to measure the success. It would be anything. It could be customer relationship management, CRM data. It really could be anything. And I basically ran that organization. It was dying on its feet. I went in there, injected energy, life, passion, loved living in Prague, drank far too much beer. Came back to Cumbria again because I was oscillating between Cumbria and Prague. It was just meant to be temporary, but it ended up being 18 months. And then I ended up being the European director for the commercial accounts of Teradata for the consulting part. So that is any account that spent less than 6 million a year just on data. Mm-hmm. That's a baby account. That was the baby account.
Yeah.
So I just fell into it, really, and I just really loved it. It was I was always really passionate about speaking to the customers and asking what it is that they wanted to understand. What insights were they looking for? And that challenged them, because sometimes they were just doing data projects because they knew they had to, but they didn't really know why.
Yeah, data is a funny one, isn't it? Because we've had this conversation before where people think, oh God, data, how boring, or I don't know what it, I know that I've got it and I've got it in spreadsheets, or, and you said that you weren't really excited about data. No. And now you can tell that when you speak to you about data, and I've had you in a room talking about data, you get really excited about it. Can you remember, was there like a switch that flipped in your head where you thought, actually, this is really interesting? Can you remember the day or the meeting or the conversation where you thought, actually, do you know what? This is really interesting. I totally get it now.
It wasn't really a day. It was more the continuous conversations that I used to have with customers. Crédit Agricole was one customer that I really enjoyed working with because they were desperate to do reporting for the European Central Bank, like all the banks had to. And they were really, really struggling to do it. And we basically set up a team in Prague to support them to do it, which it ended up being about 25 consultants in the end. And their, what's the word? I won't say contentment, but that's completely the wrong word. Their excitement about how we were helping them build the reports that they needed to have was almost tangible. And they were the first bank to submit these particular reports that had to be submitted to the European Central Bank. And they were so proud of that. And I really felt proud that we'd been part of that. And you could understand the importance of it because it was data that was regulatory and needed to keep that bank running. You know, if they failed, they would have had to have shut down. And it's a huge bank in France. That was one thing. But I also really enjoyed hearing the success stories about, for example, an insurance company that put a black box into cars and that helped lower young people's insurance. And that was built on our data analytics platform, so that they could actually observe real time how people were driving and then give them a reduction in their insurance because they were driving sensibly, because they had this little black box in their car. And you could start seeing the impact of why this was really important. And then there was a health company in Germany that used Teradata. And because they digitized all their all the data around their patients and the patients' records, etc., they could start running analytics, and they actually could start seeing paths whereby they could identify that somebody was actually they were heading towards a particular illness. It was very much around head injuries, etc. And it was really amazing when you started understanding that they could spot things that they hadn't been able to spot before because they could see trends within the data. And you start thinking, these are real insights that, yes, a really clever consultant could have got to if they had spent 6 years going through different clients' folders and reading and understanding and rechecking. Whereas you put artificial intelligence in there and it's hours sometimes. That's how fast you can get these insights. And that's what I think is really exciting when you see what you can actually do with data. And it's not about replacing humans. Sometimes it's about mimicking humans, but most of the time, I believe it's about enabling humanity, basically.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it, with data, is if you can give something tangible and show an output and show what you can do with data, it makes it so much more than a spreadsheet or people's files, like you were saying with the doctors. It makes it so much more than that because it's an actual tangible output. And yes, any business can do that, right? It's not just these huge businesses that spend less than £6 million on data, and anyone can do it.
And that's why I wanted to set up Enable Success, because I was sick and tired of data analytics being seen as something that belonged to big data, to big companies with big data. And the guys that I work with, the guys that I do the analytics with, we all really believe that. You know, we want to help smaller organizations understand and unlock the insight. So I like to use this image. Imagine an old-fashioned metal filing cabinet. In the office. There's usually one there, even now today. There are loads of them in Cumbria. And each drawer has a different key because the HR person has their key for their drawer. The finance person has their key for their drawer. The salesperson, who definitely wants to keep their information to themselves, has a key for their drawer. And the fact is that that's all information. Those paper files in the old days is all information. And all data is exactly that information, but it's been digitized. And yes, it can still be locked, but now you can actually start doing connections between customers and their profiles, between products and how you're developing products, between your employees and how you need to train and develop your employees, and between your financials. So you can actually see into the future and you can start estimating whether or not such a product is going to make more money than another product. You can have all of this now connected together. Sadly, what people now do is they have a spreadsheet on their laptop, which is, in inverted commas, locked, and they don't want to share it. But the more you actually demonstrate to people that you can bring this data together, create a really fancy dashboard very, very quickly, and get these insights, you start thinking, hold on a minute, this is crazy that I have all this information locked in these metaphorical filing cabinets. And we need to unlock that data and be able to help people understand, basically, see their businesses much more holistically, and everybody sees the same data. So you don't have the salesperson arguing with the products person, arguing with HR, and everybody arguing with finance. They all look at the same data.
With finance, everyone always argues with finance.
Yes.
Finance.
Yes. The thing is, they have the power, don't they? Because their numbers are the ones that get reported. So they're the real numbers, whatever anybody else might think.
Yeah. So you'll have seen this in countless organizations then. You know, you said everyone has the key to their own drawer and no one wants to share that information. what would you say to someone who is maybe a managing director or a business owner who loves the idea of getting their data together, digitizing it, and actually starting to look for trends, but their organization is siloed and they know that their staff are not sharing information with each other in the way that they want them to? How do you start to break that down?
Right. Well, so I think one thing is very clear is that data isn't the magic wand. It isn't a Harry Potter scenario, because what happens is you've got a cultural thing going on there as well. What I do think people need to do is to start to look at their corporate or their business strategy, however small the business is. What is your mission statement? What is your strategy? Is everybody behind that strategy? And that helps. If everybody is behind that strategy, that helps break down the barriers. Then what I always find is the great thing to do is to pick an area that you really want to get fixed. It's important to fix it, whatever that might be. And so Credit Agricole was the regulatory requirements for the European Central Bank, for example. Volvo might be, we want to understand certain little parts of a car, not all the car, but certain parts of the car. So therefore we need to put sensors on them and get data on them. You will have something in a business that is key for your business going forward. And what you need to do then is do a bit of analytics, get a smart little dashboard and actually see the insights. This isn't one of the things that really you mustn't do is do something that looks really smart, but actually doesn't
tell you anything.
Yeah. So the question that I always ask a customer is, so what? And I sometimes try and say it with a teenager's accent, or not accent, sorry, a teenager's attitude. So what? It's like, I know it sounds rude, I know it sounds cheeky, but so what? What is that insight going to give you? Because if you can demonstrate that so what is important, the other people in the business want something like that. They will think that's not fair that so-and-so's got that. I need something because I've got a so what question to answer as well. And then you can build momentum. Trying to fix it all in one go, in my experience, has never worked.
No.
It just doesn't work. You need to win people over slowly but surely. When I say slowly but surely, I'd like to think that if you did it properly, you could have won people over by 6 months, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because if you do it in an agile way, within 6 weeks, you might have something that looks really smart. And we're doing that. We're hopefully doing that with one customer. We're hopefully going to help them be able to present something that will demonstrate to their board that actually this is really good. This is really interesting. And it's not as painful as you thought it was going to be. And look at those insights.
Yeah. And I think, in my history of my role at the Chamber is business growth. And you talk a lot about digital transformation. And I think that there seems to be a bit of a misconception against things like business growth and digital transformation, that it has to be this huge, great, big performance. If you're going to do a digital transformation of your business, you have to do the whole business in one fell swoop. If you're going to grow your business, you have to grow the whole business. And actually, I don't believe that is always the way of doing it. Why do you need to boil the ocean and overface yourself? Because I think a lot of businesses start like that and then think this is too hard and then stop.
Yes.
And absolutely. They don't actually get any further forward.
Yeah. I remember once working with a team in Moscow, funnily enough, which is a bit poignant, I suppose. And we were talking about the business and what needed to be done. And somebody muttered in the background, we're trying to build starships. But that stuck with me because actually, as just to your point there, Eve, there is a danger, and entrepreneurs are really good at this, of wanting to build a starship. And sometimes, yes, that does happen, but normally it happens through very small steps that people haven't seen. They see the starship. They don't realize it took quite a long time to actually get to that starship. And if with data, very much with data, if you don't build small and slowly and carefully, then you will end up with some monstrous thing that takes 6 weeks to run one report. And I have seen that happen. because they didn't start small. They didn't start with an architecture, which is one of the words that you use in data architecture, which is exactly the same as a house architecture. The idea is the same, that everything connects and that everything relies on each other. So when you build a house in a particular way. When you build a data warehouse, an analytics platform, you need to build it in a very methodical way and a very sensible way. And it's these small building blocks that are really important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it, because you will look at, I want to build a house. And like you say, you can build a house to whatever blueprint you want, but you don't just suddenly bring everything in and shove everything in the middle and now you've got a house. You've got to put the foundations in, you've got to put the walls in, you've got to put the roof trusses on, you've got to put the roof on, and you've got to do it in bite-sized chunks. Like, don't try and boil the ocean and do everything all at once. Do it step by step and you will get there eventually. Do you ever find with data that people start building a house and they get the sides up, then they forget about the roof and put the windows in? Is that quite an easy thing to do when you're starting thinking about digital transformation, or
yes,
do you tend to find that people follow the path?
What happens is that people have, I get anxious when people start talking about data and the IT department. Information technology is obviously incredibly important, and it's very important within the regards of digital transformation. I prefer data to sit with the business, to be honest with you, because in fact it's insights and it's information.
So who in the business would have the data if it's not IT?
The data should be owned by the business unit. So the data for HR should be owned by HR. The data for finance should be owned by finance. IT supports the infrastructure. What happens is that there will be a decision to buy a particular solution. I'm not going to name any, but there'll be a desire to buy a particular solution which will promise to deliver all that HR might have wanted. And the IT department will dutifully go away and look at different solutions and come back and say, this is the one that we can use. We've been given a budget. And HR kind of like say, we didn't want that one, we wanted this one, and blah, blah, blah. But what happens is, and this is going back to, I am going to answer your question. What happens is that you end up buying IT solutions that actually lock data and information in a particular place. And it becomes really difficult to integrate that data with other areas of the business. So you've built a room in the house, but there's no freaking door. You know, there's a window, you can look at it, you can see what's going on inside, but you cannot access what's going on inside there, because IT solutions love to make their solution almost as if they want to put handcuffs on you and say, if you buy this solution, you'll be able to buy our other solution and plug it in. But no way can you export the data and use it and look at it through Tableau or Power BI, or, you know, or put it onto an SQL server or put it into the cloud. It can be in the cloud, but it still has to stay in our solution. And that's what happens, I believe, is that the house is built around different IT solutions that don't communicate with each other properly. And that's where you end up with a data nightmare.
Yeah. So that then is a skill. Would you say it is a skill or something really important to think about? Once you've got the blueprint for the house, you know what you want the house to look like.
Yes.
And you think, right, well, we're going to focus on building the living room. Do you then need to think about, be able to stop, zoom back out to look at the house to make sure that it all fits together, and then zoom back in? Is it important to have those checkpoints when you're starting to go through your business?
Yeah. So
how do you schedule those in? How do you know when's a good time to have one of those checkpoints?
I think that if you're going to be doing something like that, you do need to have a sort of the C-level management, or depending on how big your business is, you do need to pull back and sit and say, right, this is the living room. Let's imagine, because the living room is a nice place where you sit and you meet people. Let's imagine that's the CRM room, basically. Yeah. So your customer relationship management room is your living room. And you've built the house, and you actually know that you want to have a customer relationship management tool. So you start to start building that sitting room. You put the furniture in, but you constantly say to yourself, how can I get those customers, that information of those customers out and take it to somewhere else? So for example, and this may not be the best analogy in the entire world, but you've got 10 people in your sitting room, you're making them a meal in the kitchen. So something else is going on in the kitchen. You need to understand what it is that those people like to eat and what they're allergic to, et cetera, et cetera. And that information has to get from the living room to the sitting room. To the kitchen, from the living room to the kitchen. And if you can't do that, then the meal that's cooked is not going to be appropriate for the people sitting in the living room. All analogies have their limits, by the way.
Yeah, and I guess a real good example of that is you have a sales CRM, and you have sales information on particular prospects, but you haven't got that information over to marketing. So sales know that someone is actually really interested in widget A. However, marketing don't have that information, so they put them in the marketing automation cycle for widget D. Yeah. And then you lose a lead because they get completely sick of the fact that you haven't listened to them.
Yes, because the actual and product development is another area that, you know, just as important there actually, is that they don't know what they're meant to be. They don't know the conversations that are going on between customers and sales and what the customers want. They're over there in R&D developing something that they think the customers want, but because they're not using the same system and looking at the same data that the salespeople and the account relationship people are gathering, you don't end up with a product that actually matches what your clients are looking for, or you don't end up with a product that your salespeople can sell because the language or the product itself, they don't understand because it's not in the world that they're living in when they're talking to your customers. It could be the right product, but they just don't know how to sell it because the information isn't flowing the other way either. And so, so marketing can be off doing the wrong thing. Product development can be off doing the wrong thing. HR can be off doing the wrong thing, training people in the wrong way for the wrong things. You know, if this data can't flow, this information cannot flow between all the different areas of a business, you're stovepiped, and you end up, the bigger you get, especially, the more risk you're carrying in the organization.
So when you say the bigger someone gets, the more risk you're carrying, at what point, is there a point that you can identify that this needs to be a priority now because we're getting bigger? What is that squeeze point where you think you would say to business owners, if you're growing your business and you suddenly get to this point and you feel like this, you need to think about your data before everyone ends up down their own rabbit holes and you're pulling them all back together?
Well, sadly, the only, I think, and I could be wrong here because I haven't done an MBA, and that's a sort of an MBA question, I suppose, really. But in truth, I would say that if you're, no matter what size actually of the organization, if your KPIs, if your key performance indicators are not aligned between your businesses, then it will be very clear when you start looking at your metrics, even individually, that you're not being successful, i.e. your sales are going down, or your what you think your products, some products are not selling as well as you thought they should be. Your customer relationships are getting worse. You're getting more customer complaints. Your staff are leaving. All of these are indicators of a disconnect within the business and a disconnect between all that information flowing. I don't know if, to be honest with you, I don't know if there's a size thing that comes in there. I think it's more, if you're looking at the revenue numbers or your profit numbers, then they're going to be the first indicators. If your revenue is falling or your profits are falling because your costs are going through the roof, if your staff are leaving, if your customers are leaving, then these are indicators that something is going wrong in your business. And usually I would say it's because the information isn't flowing between the business units. And it's a very simple I'm being very biased there because I am obviously data orientated, and an MBA student would say, oh, there'll be loads of other things. And yes, there are loads of other things, but that's what I would be looking for. I'm not really sure if a business gets to a certain size, you need to make sure that I think you should start as you mean to go on. Doesn't matter how big your business is. And I actually think that one thing that I would love to do is, have everybody who's got a business, whether they're big or small, in the perfect world, it's very sort of like out there world, but you get your iPhone or your Android phone or your tablet or your laptop, and you look in the morning at your dashboard, and that dashboard is telling you that your business is running smoothly because the dashboard is pulling the information from all the different areas, and you get a picture of the whole thing. You start small, you get bigger, that has to change, but those insights are really important to your KPIs, and that doesn't really matter how big your business is.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about KPIs. And this is very much my opinion, and I love having this conversation with you because I've also worked for a big FTSE company, and there seems to be a more candid discussion with people who've worked for big businesses around things like KPIs. They're not really that scary. Some of the smaller businesses that I've worked in, when you mention KPIs, people's toes curl and they look really uncomfortable and think, oh, well, I can't put KPIs in on my staff, or I can't put KPIs in. What is your opinion of a KPI? And how do you have that conversation with a small business owner or their staff to say KPIs aren't actually scary and you really should have them?
So once again, I'll answer that from a data perspective, but hopefully it's not difficult to move to a more holistic perspective. Staff well-being is absolutely key, and it's become more and more and more prevalent as COVID has kicked in, and people are now actually stopping and thinking about their well-being and wanting to balance life and work, etc., etc. I think KPIs actually are meant to be about staff well-being and company well-being. The two things are very, very well connected. If you have a business where your staff are constantly leaving, and you have a business model where you don't care about your staff because you don't care about staff turnover, but your business model is profitable and blah, 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 then okay, fine. Ethical? I'm not going to maybe,
questionable.
Yeah, questionable, but there we go. I'm not going to go there. But a KPI should be something that an individual has signed up to. And from a data perspective, it has to be measurable. You have to have SMART objectives, yeah? So that the person understands what that is, that measure, and how they can achieve it, and that it is achievable, yeah? No point in giving people KPIs that they can't achieve, unless you want them to leave. And that's a good way of getting people to leave, I suppose. But the data behind it, the information behind it needs to be accessible. And in the perfect world, once again, I could wake up, I could look at my app in the morning on a Monday morning and think, right, I'm doing well on my KPIs last week. But this week I need to do this, this, and this. And that will make sure that I'm getting a really good set of KPIs measures for my month, for my year, for etc. So people can actually see that they are successful on a regular basis. They don't have to have that horrible sickly feeling once every 6 months and once every year when they have their appraisal of have I done a good job or not. They know they've done a good job. It's there in front of them. They can see that. And a KPI should be something that inspires you, not frightens you. Basically. And the company's measures of success should be things that inspire everybody, from the CEO down to the person who is, I don't know, somebody who, if you employ your own cleaners, somebody who is actually cleaning the office, because they know that having a clean office is a really important part of the atmosphere, the well-being of everybody. So they all can see from the top, from what, I don't want to say from the top because that's being hierarchical, but from every aspect of a business, everybody knows that they're actually playing their part for the success of the business. And the data, the information, has to be available. It can't be something that you only find out every 6 months or every year, and you've got that sickly feeling before you go into a meeting. Have I done a good job or not?
So that sounds to me, in a very simplistic term, that comes down to transparency and communication, which are two fundamentals of good leadership.
Yes, absolutely. And enable success, underneath everything that I talk about, I have the three sort of like little diamonds sit underneath my logo, and each one of those reflects ethical use of data, sustainable use of data, and people-centric use of data. And it's about this transparency, it's this openness that drives good practice, best practice, whether in leadership or not, in any aspect of the business. But yes, they're very, very basic fundamentals of leadership.
Mm-hmm. So you've said about the three fundamentals of your business. If you had to pick 3 non-negotiable behaviors of the people that work with you, whether that be a client that's embarking on a digital transformation journey with you or someone that works for you, what are the 3 non-negotiable behaviors that you need to have in someone to work really well with them?
Oh gosh, 3 non-negotiable. I think that diversity is something that I would expect, especially if you're talking about digital transformation, because you need people to think outside the box. So encouraging diversity, and Cumbria, it's difficult to do, but it's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. So I think that that's one. Imagination, innovation. I would really struggle to work with a business that came in thinking we don't want to change. We're absolutely rigid in everything that we do. Because when it comes to information, if you are going to digitize all your information, you're going to have insights that you weren't even aware of. You're going to find out things that you didn't know. So that there needs to be an element of flexibility. And also, I think the other one that I would struggle with is, it's going a little bit back to what you were saying earlier on, is trying to boil the ocean. It's this trying to build spaceships. I wouldn't stand in the way, obviously. I wouldn't say that the customer was wrong by any stretch of the imagination, but I would be quite challenging about how much you want to transform and at what point do you want to transform. There's lots of technology out there. It's Internet of Things. Yeah, there's a million different ways of tracking people and everything like that. So I would say, how are you going to do this? Let's do it in small chunks. Because you're just going to totally overpower yourself. So let's be contained rather than trying to go out there and try and do everything in one go. So I would encourage customers not to try and do too much too fast when it comes to technology. And actually, I would encourage customers to try and keep it simple at first. That whole saying of, learn how to walk before you can run sort of thing. And with technology, there's a danger that people who are developing technology get very, very excited about their particular solutions, which is right, which is good. But at the same time, they do need to be tempered with reality. And what are you going to do with this? And back to the so what question, really, what can this technology actually help you do? And will your customers actually want to engage with this technology straight away? But so it's that sensible sort of approach.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about technology then, like you said, everyone gets so excited about the technology that they've created. In your career, what has been the most transformational technology that you've come across or you've seen?
In all honesty and truth, it's the mobile phone, it's the smartphone. In my opinion, yes, you could say, processors or something like that, because they've without those, we wouldn't have the smartphones. But when you think about customers, as in human beings, since 2007 or whenever it was that the iPhone came out, it has transformed the way human beings interact with one another in so many ways, some good ways, some not so good ways. But it has impacted all that we do almost, from falling in love to assessing how much electricity your solar panels are generating and how full your new battery is, charged up to keep your house going during the night. It's incredible. Tracking your dog, it's, watching, we're having a webcam on your cat, knowing what it's up to while you're at work. It's unbelievable what happens on that phone now. It's unbelievable. And I wonder how far it will go, and I'm fascinated with it. But at the same time, I think, once again, we have to be careful about the ethical side of it, the sustainability side of it, and making sure that technology is empowering people, not replacing people, which is what I think people are worried about when it comes to technology.
Yeah, I think people do worry an awful lot about technology, don't they? And it's this, is it going to replace us? What are we going to do? But the flip side of that is you also have people worry about data. And I know we've had this conversation in the past, and it was on our panel discussion, that sometimes as a business, it can be worrying to then think we're going to analyze our customers' data. And will our customers trust us? And are our customers going to ask, why are you collecting this data on us? And that's a challenge in itself. But I think sometimes you have to remember that that little computer on your phone that you carry around all day long, and everything that you do, it knows what you look at. It knows how long you look at a post on Instagram, even if you don't like it. If you've got, look at the latest trend in apps is TikTok. Everyone's newsfeed is completely different because of the data that it's collected on you.
Yes.
So if that person's phone and all of these huge companies, TikTok, Facebook, or Meta as it's called now, yes, Amazon, how do you then have that conversation as a business in Cumbria to say we're going to start collecting data on our customers and we're going to start using it, but don't be afraid of it? Right.
So there are a couple of things going on there, I think. One of them is that the data is going to be collected. And unless we go back in time, there's very little we can do about that. What we can do something about is what we do with that data. And I do think that there are some very, very unethical companies out there that sell their data. I actually think that if you're a company in Cumbria, you need to say that we will never sell your data to anybody, even though it's, it's a very lucrative thing, and data is worth a fortune. They say it's the new oil, or oil is obviously not a good example because it's not very sustainable, but you get my meaning. But I personally think that companies need to start drawing a line and saying your data will never leave us. And also GDPR demands that people can see what data you've got of them anyway. And I actually think that companies should make it very, very easy for customers to access their own personal data. Obviously, this has to be surrounded with security, because if I can access my data really easily, it means that I might be able to access your data really easily. So there are really, really, really important aspects of security and how these things are looked at. And indeed, in a company, who can see my data? Because I don't believe that everybody should be able to, everybody who works in HSBC should not be able to see all the account data of all the accounts. When I worked in HSBC, if I had somebody's account number, it didn't matter where they worked, I could look, where they lived, I could look up their account details and I could see how much money they had in their bank account. And I could see the linked accounts. Now I believe you can't do that, I believe, but I don't know for sure. But, think about that. It's not, it's a bit scary. And in Cumbria, if you think of a website that's Cumbria focused and has got a lot of followers, if that owner of that website, if all the employees of that website can see all of that information, then yeah, they could gossip. It could get out. So you have to be really secure with who can see the data and why they can see the data. And you have to build in the infrastructure within the architecture of the data. You need to build in measures to stop that from happening. And I think that as long as a company is open and honest about how their data is being managed, I think that that will help win people's trust. Yes, there's always going to be people hacking, but let's think about this. There's always somebody who could walk into an office and jimmy open a filing cabinet and get all that data, that paper data as well. Let's not fool ourselves that it's not important. You know, if it was all back to paper, it would still be absolutely secure, because it wouldn't be. You know, it's not going, but it's not going away. That's the thing. Are you prepared to give up your phone, Eve?
Ooh.
No, you're not.
No, no, I was thinking actually some days I'd love to throw it in a river, but then,
yeah, but when it comes down to yeah, that's because you want to rest, but you're not prepared to. And believe me, no, most people aren't.
It's incredible, isn't it, when you think your phone's going to die, how stressed you get.
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah. And also, you know, everything's on there. If you lose your phone, you don't have a paper copy now of all your contact details. Well, you should
How many telephone numbers can you remember off by heart?
None. Whereas when I was a kid, I could remember everybody's.
Yeah.
I can still remember the telephone number of one of my best friends who doesn't even live in that house anymore, and that telephone number belongs to somebody else. I can remember that telephone number, but can I remember my sister's mobile number? No way. No way. Absolutely no way. I can remember the last 2 digits. So
and the first 2.
Yeah, but nobody's going to give up their phone.
No.
It's not going to happen. So we need to wake up and realize that what we need to do is to build ethical, transparent data solutions and really make it clear that we are not going to sell your data. Your data is not going to get into the hands of the wrong people. We will treat it with respect. And in fact, if you want to know in our company who can have access to your data, we can give you a list of their names and why they've got access, or at least not their names, but their job roles and why they've got access. Yeah.
And I think if I can find it, I will certainly put it in the show notes. There is a fantastic video on YouTube, and I believe it may be an interview as well. And it was someone really proving that actually having an office and having data in an office isn't necessarily more secure than having it in the cloud or on a server or whatever. And how 2 people managed to break into an office and steal a server by using a pellet gun through a fence to break someone's car windscreen. And all of the small things that they did on the back of that to get into this huge office that had spent millions on security systems and managed to get a hold of their data, because they went around the office and I think they managed to plug in USB sticks to some of the computers and no one even stopped them. And that just goes to show that actually having hard copy data it's probably less secure than it being in the cloud, actually.
And you can't well, yeah, you just can't get away from the fact that this is where we're going, unless we choose to turn the clocks back and live in a very different way, which maybe we will. I don't know. Who knows? You know, but I can't see that happening. I just can't. The fundamental question is, I cannot see people giving up their iPhones or their Android phone.
No. So let's turn the clock back a little bit then, because you said that you were made redundant from Teradata?
Yes. I'd had enough.
That's how you set up Enable Success. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, I mean, I think I'd had enough of working for the corporate world. This was less than 2 years ago now. And Teradata had gone through about 700 million restructurings and re-strategizing and re this and re that and re the other. And I'd had enough. And I thought, you know what, I'm getting quite old here. I need to think about what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so this is what I chose to do. You know, I was given the chance to take redundancy, so I took it, and I thought, right, I want to see if I can start up my own business. I spent last year doing an awful lot of thinking about it, you know, as you were aware, Eve, but I wasn't really pushing it until probably the latter half of last year, when I thought, you know, I really want to go for this. One of the things that's really come out of this for me is that, as well as me wanting to have my own business and to prove the concept, etc., I want to, I'm going to sound like Martin Luther King now, but I have this vision of an insight center in Cumbria. Now, I personally, at the moment, I use guys who are offshore, because I've used them all my life. Well, not all my life, but all my, you know, Teradata life. It's people I've worked with for decades, and we know what we're doing as a team, and we can deliver world-class solutions for everyday companies now, which I think is brilliant. You know, I really do. But that being said, I would love to have an insight company, an insight organization in Cumbria that was actually attracting young people to come and work and stay in Cumbria, getting them from the HE colleges, getting them from the university, and having it as a center for analytics as a service, so that, you know, any organization, the chamber, BECBC, I don't care, you know, the LEP, Sellafield, even, you know, down to, you know, Stagecoach, or down to a little restaurant. You know, if they wanted to do some analytics, they could say, Andrew, we've got this data. We just go to the Insight Center. You'd be allocated a consultant who would work with your data and deliver it back to you in whatever visualization you want, whether it be Power BI, on an Excel spreadsheet, or Tableau, or, you know, one of them. There's a myriad of new visualization tools coming out every day. So, and that's what I would really love to do and have in place for Cumbria. And, you know, it could take customers from wherever else, but it means that you don't have to go and buy or employ your own data scientist, your own BI analyst, you know, your own AI specialist, your own developers. You would only use them as you need to, because these resources are quite expensive to have as a full-time employee. And depending on the size of your organization, they might be sitting there twiddling their thumbs for quite a lot of the time. And you really don't want that. No. You want to buy into something. And what I would love then is the younger people that have moved into the business, which is, so I'd like to basically recreate what I was running in Prague, but having it in Cumbria. But I'd like to have that as an insight center that would educate young people in business, because the great thing about it is, yes, somebody could write SQL and that's all they do. But I never allowed my consultants to do that. I asked them, what is it that you're doing? And they go, well, what do you mean? What report are you building? What data are you looking at? And I would make them go back to the customer and have conversations about the business requirements, the outcomes that were needed for what they were doing. And they suddenly got really interested in their jobs, because they were actually seeing business questions being answered. And that would be great. And it hopefully would keep young people in Cumbria.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's asking them the so what.
Yeah.
From the other side, isn't it? So
Absolutely.
what? So why are you doing that?
Yes, absolutely. And they could be, one minute they could be working on some data from 5 different restaurants that have decided that they want to do a proof of concept for an app that, you know, they would run for multiple restaurants in Cumbria, and you could go in and log in, you know, like the food apps and things that you do, you know, you can, but, you know, something that would do that, they could be doing that. And the next minute they could be working on something for a manufacturing organization. The next minute they could be doing something for, you know, hopefully something for the NHS Trust in Cumbria, you know, so these people, these, you know, new, hopefully people who want to stay in Cumbria could be moving from business to business and getting loads of different exposure and experience. And it could be really exciting. So that's something that I'm really, really passionate about, but we'll have to wait and see, you know.
So that is the goal. That is the ultimate goal.
Yes.
But you're not boiling the ocean, and you're not
no
just yet.
No.
So what is the first chunk that you're tackling then as enable success? Because really you're kind of in your first year, really, aren't you now?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
What is your first thing that you are tackling as enable
So
success year one?
What we've been doing is working with several different organizations, and quite interestingly, really different businesses. So that's what I'm really enjoying. One minute I'm talking to one business, next minute I'm talking to another, next minute, and they're all completely different. And one of them we're talking about basic data, another one we're talking about forecasting, another one we're talking about business strategy and digital strategy and helping them build that. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, is I'm actually just proving the concept of what the Insight Center could do in years to come, and supplying that end-to-end sort of from the strategic right down to the nitty-gritty, doing the data analytics and building and working on the SQL, etc., and just proving that case and doing it with several different businesses, which I'm really enjoying. It's really good fun. Obviously, I need more customers. We always need more customers. So who knows? Who knows
what'll happen? Give it 5 years, and we'll come back and have another conversation.
Yeah, we can have a conversation in the Insight Center, which will be based somewhere on the West Coast with these little hubs, one in Carlisle, one in Kendal, one in Barrow, maybe one in Penrith,
little satellites, satellite offices,
yes.
Completely green, helping the environment,
Totally.
bringing people into the area, which is absolutely what we want to do.
Yeah.
I hope we get there.
Yeah, so do I.
So a few more questions then. Obviously, you are very, very enthusiastic, and I love that about you, which is why I'm always on the phone to you, asking you questions and getting you involved in stuff, and getting Andrew's energy behind things, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only crazy energetic person running around the county like a complete idiot. But that's fine. Sometimes you need to have a band of merry men, don't you?
Yeah.
So in your opinion, what is your superpower?
My superpower is making friends, which sounds a bit daft, doesn't it, really, I suppose?
No,
actually it's infecting people with my passion for what I want to do, and getting them excited, but at the same time it's winning them over, and getting people to think, actually, do you know something, this might work, it could work, and then actually keeping people going, which is hard. It's great to have a vision, but it's harder to keep on energizing it. And that's something that I do seem to be able to do. I seem to be able to win people over, get people on board, and keep the energy going. So if that's a superpower, then that's it.
I would say it is. So how do you keep that energy up? Do you have down days, or are you always up, ready to go?
Oh yeah, no. Of course I have down days, and in fact, I think it's important to have down days, because I think if you're not having days where you're questioning and feeling tired, then I'm just wondering whether or not you're actually on Earth. And I think that that sort of cycle of life is really important. And I'm not going to burst into a Disney song, I promise. But
that's a shame.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? But I do think that being very honest about how one feels and where the energy comes from and where it gets sucked out is really important to the success factor. Because I think that if you're delusional and think that everything is perfect and it's always going to be perfect, then one day you will hit a brick wall, because it's not. Things aren't. And I do get frustrated with sometimes how slow things might go. But then at the same time, when I look back, I sometimes, people point out to me, Andrew, I can't believe that you've done that much in just like 3 months or whatever it might be, whatever time it is. And I'm like, I look back and I go, oh yeah, because a day can be very long, especially a day when things haven't moved that much. And one day can feel like a month. of sludge and not getting anywhere. Whereas another day can be like you've just been shot to the moon and back. And it's balancing those things and being able to stand back. So that's how I think I keep on going. And in the end, you've got to believe that what you're doing is worthwhile. As you know, I have a hidden thing as well that we haven't really spoken about, which I'll mention now, and then you can edit it out if you want to.
Well, interestingly enough, my next question is probably going to be about what you're about to talk about, so I'll just let you keep going.
So I have a really, really weird patchwork, or no, a weird bag of things that go on in my life. So there's the whole data stuff, and then there's I'm one of the non-exec board members for the chamber. I'm an associate director for the University of Cumbria. I'm the chair of governors for a local Church of England primary school. I love cycling. I'm doing an MSc in digital transformation. But I'm also an ordained minister within the Church of England. So I'm a deacon at the moment, and I get ordained priest in July. And that is obviously a very strange connection or collection of things. It's not strange for me, obviously, because I live it, but it is very strange for people who hear about it. And when I have turned up to client meetings and the chamber with my dog collar on, it does kind of it's quite amusing, really, looking at the people's reactions or responses. But that in itself is something that is obviously very important to my stability and the way that I live my life. And without that, I'm not actually sure I could continue with all the other stuff. But that itself has its challenges. Parish life is not easy. And, we should never fool ourselves. And the church has hundreds of problems, hundreds of challenges, which, I'm partly involved with in the communities that I worship with. And that's, but once again, it just adds to life's rich pattern,
life's rich tapestry.
That's it.
So what have you learned from that journey into being a deacon? And then you said you're going to be an ordained priest in a few months' time. What have you learned from that journey that you've been able to transfer into business?
You have to be very, very patient with people. When I managed teams, and usually my teams were always, Prague was different because I had everybody in the same building as me, but I've also managed teams that were right across the world. So people based in America, India, Pakistan, Manila, even Australia. And what I've learned is that you need to understand where people are. And this comes back to the business thing very much so. You need to help businesses really understand where they are. And sometimes they'll tell you one thing, but when you start asking questions about the data, it suddenly becomes, they'll tell you, oh, we've got this, we've got that, we've got the other. You start scratching the surface and you suddenly realize, no, you haven't. You think you have, but you haven't really. And that's the same with church. And you can go into a parish, and I think one of the dangerous things in the church world is that the church it's sort of businessized itself, which it shouldn't, because it's a family, it's not a business. And it's one of the fundamental faults with the church is that sometimes it thinks it's a business, and you can get priests, ministers going in and acting like business people, and they go in and they say, I'm going to sort this parish out, and that is a terrible approach. Sitting with, listening, learning, serving is what we're called to do as ministers in the church. And I actually think as management consultants that go in and go blah, 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 and talk about Harvard's Business Review and talk about Porter's 6 foundations of business strategy or whatever it might be, and then try and take over, are terrible management consultants. I think management consultants need to go in and listen and understand and have the courage to say to a client, you think you're here, but actually you're here. And sometimes have to say it quite firmly, but one would hope with politely. Because if you can't do that, you can't help a person, an organization, a group of people truly move from A to B. And that is as true in church as it is in business.
Mm-hmm. You said about life's rich tapestry and how people can think that it's a bit odd of all of the weird and wonderful things that you have going on, which I don't think are weird and wonderful. I just think they're wonderful. Mm-hmm. What's the most common misconception of you, and what would you say to set it straight?
Conception of me, that I know all the answers, because I don't, but I am prepared to travel the journey with people. And there is a danger within priesthood of people thinking that you have, or you think you know all the answers to all holy religious sort of things. And when you go in to speak to people about data analytics, I have to remind them that it's their information, not my information. Mm-hmm. And they're the subject matter experts of their information. My role is to help them unpack that, unlock it. And so in all those areas, there is a danger of you walk into the room and people put you on a pedestal. And I'm very quick at trying to get off that pedestal.
What would you tell your teenage self?
Chill out.
Chill out. In what way?
Well, teenagers think they know everything, and then it goes horribly downhill from then onwards, doesn't it? And I think that as a teenager, I really, thought I got it all sussed, and that life was going to be X, Y, and Z, and the path was organized, and blah 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 blah. If I could, I'd just turn around to my teenage self and say, just chill, take a chill pill and enjoy the journey, rather than trying to get to the destination. Rather than thinking about the destination, enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey. If there was a movie going to be made about your life, what would it be called? And which actor would play you?
I think I'd like to call it Oops, I've Messed Up Again. Or what have I learned today? Something like that. Yeah, one of those two things. Who would play me? Ryan Reynolds, is it? The guy who's, what's his name? The one that he played Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool.
Yeah, he would have. Yeah, him. Yeah,
interesting.
It would have to
choice.
Be him. Yeah.
Why would it have to be Ryan Reynolds?
Because he's bonkers, and I like that. I think that. I mean, okay, there are some things that Deadpool says that a man of the cloth probably shouldn't align himself to, but at the same time, I love his honesty. And when he's been interviewed, he's always just really honest. He just says, he tries to say what it is that's going through his head, but he also has from my perspective anyway, a rather wicked but brilliant sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting. So we're going to finish off with a few quick fire questions.
Okay.
Not many.
And how many words do I have to answer each one of the questions?
It's this or that.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So it should be pretty quick. Phone or text?
Text.
Email or meeting?
Email.
Ooh.
I know.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Beach holiday or skiing holiday?
Beach. That's not fair.
Dogs or cats?
Oh, come on, cat. Dogs.
Andrew is the owner of three lovely
Labradors
dogs who are probably now leaving the house. That he's just said, obviously cats.
No, they're here, both wagging their tails, and the other one's not in the room. So
I'm definitely not taking that out. That's staying on here forever. Sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
And finally, does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yes.
I feel like this is going to be the most controversial question of the whole podcast series. So we'll keep a tally and see how many say yes and how many say no.
I love a ham and pineapple pizza.
I think that's going to be controversial.
Yeah, that's fine. I understand it. Yeah, I've got friends who just think it's awful that I could even contemplate that. So,
and are there any final thoughts or anything that you would like listeners to take away from this conversation, or anything you can give to them to take forward in their thoughts about data, or their thoughts about their business, or their thoughts about life?
Data is simply information. Don't be frightened about the fact that it sits on technology. Leverage the fact that it sits on technology, because it makes it so easy to get insights from data, a lot easier than a filing cabinet full of paper documents.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was absolutely brilliant. And I hope everyone enjoyed listening to that. And please click the subscribe button. And if you like this, please share it on social media. Tag me, tag Cumbria Chamber, and of course, tag Andrew. I will leave information on Enable Success in the show notes. And if you do have any questions or comments, or you would like something, you would like to nominate someone to be interviewed, please email me at eve@cumbriachamber.co.uk. Until next time, take care.